time. It always moves forward, but it never leaves the past behind. Memories, secrets, shadows, they all hide somewhere, in the darkest corners of the mind, in pages no one dares to turn, in stories too terrifying to be told. I've seen things most people couldn't even imagine. Truths buried in the dark, hidden but never erased. Darkness embraces secrets, conceals them, but nothing stays hidden forever. Not from me. You know, some books create more questions than answers. Every page carries the scent of the past, the echoes of forgotten truths. Just like this one. What makes a story truly terrifying? Maybe it's the place you least expect. Join me if you're not afraid of the dark. London, 1888. A thick fog blankets the streets of Whitechapel. A shadow moves in the darkness. Someone who was never caught, yet his name was etched into history forever. Jack the Ripper. This city is darker than you think. Behind every alley, in every shadow, a secret waits to be uncovered. And in the autumn of 1888, London witnessed a shadow that turned nightmares into reality. Now that darkness has engulfed everything, let us return to one of the most chilling chapters in London's history. A mystery that still lingers in the minds of many. It all began on August 31st, 1888, when the world was shaken by a haunting discovery in Whitechapel. Her name was Mary Ann Nichols. Mary Ann Nichols, a homeless and destitute woman, was found in a dark alley. Not a sign of struggle, nor shallow wounds, but the work of a skilled killer. All that remained was fear. What mattered was not who she was, but how she was killed. No one knew the identity of the murderer. All that remained was doubt and fear. But everyone agreed on one thing: this murder was different. There was no trace of the killer. The only thing people saw was a shadow slipping away into the darkness. The police searched meticulously for any trace of the killer, but they found nothing. Everything was swallowed by silence and darkness. Fear gripped the people, but who could have known? Who could have known that this murder was only the first step in a ruthless massacre? But this was only the beginning. In the nights that followed, the killer continued his work. But who was he? Who could commit such atrocities? On the second night of this dark terror, September 8th, 1888, Annie Chapman became the next victim of Jack the Ripper. A woman with a complicated and painful past. she met her end in the cold embrace of the night. Annie Chapman, a woman burdened with endless suffering, fell victim to the killer in another part of Whitechapel. On that cold night, she was found near the gate of a decaying house where the killer came for her with deadly precision. The killer, just like in the first murder, had carried out his work flawlessly, but this time he left something even more terrifying behind, something that is even unsettling to mention. Annie Chapman became another victim of Jack the Ripper. But what made the terror even worse was that this murder took place so close to where the police were actively searching for the killer. They were investigating, but the killer remained hidden in the shadows. No trace, no sign of his presence. The police soon realized that Jack the Ripper was always one step ahead. Not only were there no clues to follow, but the killer was skilled and merciless. After Annie Chapman's murder, a deep fear spread through the heart of Whitechapel people who could no longer sleep peacefully at night. But what consequences did this murder truly have for Jack the Ripper? He retreated even further into the shadows, and no one could find him. But still, the murders continued. Fear grew in the alleys and streets of Whitechapel, and no one could resist this deadly terror. The next murders would be even more horrifying than Annie Chapman's. After the second murder, people slowly began to realize that these killings might be the work of a serial killer. No one knew who this person was yet, but every time the shadow of death passed through the streets of Whitechapel, everyone knew that fear was rising from every corner. But what terrified people even more was a letter sent to the police on September 27th, 1888, a letter from Jack the Ripper. As he introduced himself in this letter, the killer dared the police to catch him if they could. Written in a playful yet menacing tone, the letter revealed the madness and mischief of the murderer. After this letter, fear among the people reached its peak. Now everyone knew that the killer was among them, but the police were still searching, unable to find any clues. Terrified, people began coming up with their own theories about this ruthless murderer. The police station was overwhelmed by a flood of public statements, none of which held any real evidence. Everyone was trying in some way to take part in solving the mystery, but the truth was, no one could uncover even a single clue about the killer. The people of Whitechapel could no longer sleep peacefully at night. Every shadow, every footstep in the dark felt like a threat. Fear roamed the streets, and no one knew who the killer's next victim would be. What was clearly evident was that Jack the Ripper had not only evaded the police, but he had become a kind of terror hero in Whitechapel. His name, Jack the Ripper, had filled people with fear and confusion, and no one could say who this demonic figure, hiding in the guise of a man, was or where he would strike next. On September 30th, 1888, Jack the Ripper claimed his third victim, Elizabeth Stride. She encountered him in the dark and quiet streets of Whitechapel. Elizabeth, known as Long Liz, was returning from one of the pubs. Around 1 a.m., her body was found in an alley. Unlike the previous two cases, this time there were no additional injuries found. Interestingly, it seems Jack the Ripper may have used a different tool in this mysterious act. People clearly realized from the very beginning that this murder was the work of the same serial killer who had committed the previous two. The murder was just as brutal. But the interesting part was that people were even more frightened by this one, because Jack the Ripper had acted with such professionalism and precision. Yes. The fourth murder began with Catherine Eddowes. On the night of September 30th, 1888, the same day that Elizabeth Stride was killed, another murder took place in London, occurring simultaneously at the heart of this event. Catherine Eddowes was found in a busy and crowded neighborhood, a place where even in the darkness of night, fear and terror had infiltrated the streets. This murder, like the others, was carried out ruthlessly and precisely, but this time, the violence reached a new level. What set this murder apart from the others was the need for highly precise surgical skills. This murder, along with the murder of Elizabeth Stride on the same night, was officially recognized as a dual event. Two similar murders in one day brought a new wave of terror to London. This time, the people no longer knew who or what might be lurking in the shadows of the night. And now, the final murder that shocked everyone. For this time it didn't take place in the dark alleys of London, but in a house. A house that, in the heart of the night, held nothing but silence and terror. And the victim was none other than Mary Jane Kelly, a young woman who, like many others, had resorted to desperate measures to survive in a world that offered few choices. But Jack the Ripper showed no mercy, and in a small, cramped house, where cracks and breaks told tales of time and forgotten lives, she became his latest victim. In the dark of night, Jack entered without a sound. No footsteps could be heard, and everything ended in an instant. On Friday, November 9th, 1888, at 10:45 a.m., her body was discovered by a passerby. What had happened inside her home was nothing less than the most brutal and savage of murders. A house that once served as a refuge for a human being had now transformed into a place filled with fear and dread. Her lifeless body cruelly sprawled in a corner. This was no mere killing. Jack the Ripper sought something more, something hidden in the darkness of the night. Was Jack the Ripper, as some speculated, a mad surgeon or doctor? This theory is one of those that truly plays with the mind. Look at the precision and the peculiar finesse with which each murder was carried out. The incisions, the kind that only a skilled surgeon could make. Was this man, or perhaps more accurately, this demon in human form, using his blood-stained hands to turn medical knowledge into a tool for killing? Surgeons know exactly how to remove internal organs without unnecessary damage, and Jack the Ripper did just that with each murder. There was no sign of ordinary brutality in his work. Instead, there was a kind of precision and delicacy more akin to a skilled doctor than a regular killer. Did this madman, with cold calculation, murder his victims and silently pass among them? Or perhaps Jack the Ripper was a butcher, someone who, in the darkness of night, with blood-stained hands, carried out his work like a skilled butcher. Nothing could provide a better explanation for the brutality and precise violence of the murders. Yes, perhaps he wasn't just an ordinary killer, but a butcher who knew exactly what he was doing. But could this theory be true as well? Perhaps he believed these women, who walked the streets in the dark, needed to answer to God. Maybe he had come to believe that these impure acts must be eradicated from the neighborhood so that sin could leave that place. A savior in the guise of a demon. A man who thought that the murders were an act of cleansing sin. But what if these murders weren't mere accidents? Could they have been the result of a ritual, something far darker than anyone imagined? Maybe Jack the Ripper wasn't just a killer, but a part of something larger, something sinister. Could he have been part of a secret group, operating under the cover of darkness with their own disturbing motives? These murders, these chilling scenes, might have been more than they appeared, possibly linked to something dark and hidden from the world. Maybe these women were victims of something far more malevolent than a common killer, and the truth behind it all is something no one dares to acknowledge. the theory you might have never considered. What if Jack the Ripper wasn't a man at all? What if he was a woman? Imagine this woman hiding behind a virtuous facade, perhaps a midwife or a nurse. Back then, it wasn't unusual for a woman to wear blood-stained clothes and visit people's homes. Who would suspect? Now picture this. A midwife with intimate knowledge of the female body, knowing exactly where its most vulnerable points are. She knew how to render her victims defenseless. When these weak and vulnerable women were found, it was easy for her to slit their throats from behind. Have you ever considered that perhaps Jack the Ripper was, all along, a woman? In the dark nights of London, who would question women walking the streets? Which man would suspect a midwife or nurse dressed in blood-stained clothes? Maybe this is the truth no one dares to speak. And now, after stepping through the darkness of London, amidst blood and tears, in search of a truth no one had the ability to see, it is time to return to where we began. The secrets of this world fade into silence and darkness. But remember, the secrets that hide in the heart of the night never fully disappear. They always wait in the corners of the dark, in places you cannot see, ready to rise again. Will the truth of Jack the Ripper remain hidden forever? Perhaps, but perhaps not. If, like me, you are in search of the truths buried in the heart of darkness, join me in a world where nothing is as it seems. We seek it together. Subscribe to my channel, for in this mysterious journey you will never be alone. We will see the world through my eyes, and surely what you will see will change everything